Start with a confession. For most of my career, I was a benevolent dictator. My only paradigm of leadership is I thought the job of a leader was to figure out what needs to be done and then tell staff what to do. And for me, that changed in 2006 as I read this book, the first edition of Leading with Questions by Dr. Michael McCourt. But as soon as I understood that concept, it was like, who wouldn't want to lead with questions?
What, according to you, is the most powerful question? Either you have asked or you have heard.
Can you please tell me more? That so many of the best questions are so simple. They're not long, complicated kind of questions. Imagine, though, that you're a leader who leads with questions. The probability is one of them might be better than what you were
Very,
thinking.
very high probability.
A leader who leads with questions is so much more effective than a leader who thinks they need to figure it out and tell them.
What is that one of those questions that you have in your life that you have been staying with for the longest period of time and is yet unanswered?
That's an incredible question. Valuing that, I'll actually have to think about that more. The answer to some questions changes over time. We need to remember that some great questions, the value is that they are excellent questions for us to ask ourselves on a regular basis, not necessarily daily or hourly, but whatever the right amount of time and space between.
Hey, Bob, such a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation and be on the podcast, The X Months Drive.
Gaurav, it is my pleasure to be with you. What a delight.
Vikram, asking questions and leading with questions is one of my favorite subjects. When people ask me, Gaurav, what is your divine gift? I tell them that I love extracting wisdom from people. And I joke around because I don't think that I've got anything that I can share with people. So I think the best I could do is just to ask questions and extract wisdom from people. And who could be a better guest than you, Bob?
Well, it is, Gaurav. We just celebrated the 12th anniversary. The blog is followed by leaders in over 200 nations.
Wow.
And the truth is, I don't know people in 200 nations, but the internet, the blog, and subscribing is free. People can go to leadingwithquestions.com, cursor towards the bottom, place to enter your email address, click on subscribe, and you'll be joining those leaders in 200 countries who are committed to increasing their leadership effectiveness. But Gaurav, I must confess, I wish I was like you, because whenever I speak, I start with a confession. This is absolutely true. My confession is that for most of my career, I was a benevolent dictator. I didn't ask questions like you.
Really?
I thought the job of a leader was to tell staff what to do, to give direction. And I did say benevolent dictator. I grew up in a home where I was taught to say please and thank you. So if you'd been on my team, Gaurav, I don't think I ever would have said, Gaurav, go do this. It would have been more like, hey, Gaurav, here's what we're working on. It'd really be nice if you could please do this. But I was still thinking the job of a leader was to tell staff what to do. And when you did it, I would have said, hey, thank you. Or a staff meeting, Gaurav, stand up. You all need to hear what Gaurav did. And I don't want to suggest we got nothing done, but I am confessing my only paradigm of leadership is I thought the job of a leader was to figure out what needs to be done and then tell staff what to do. And for me, that changed in 2006 when I love books. And this is literally the book I bought. You can see I devoured it. I started teaching out of it, sharing with others. But the first edition of Leading with Questions by Dr. Michael McCourt. And as I read this book, and it's filled with stories of leaders literally from around the globe, not just the US, but around the globe, sharing how they were leading with questions and the questions they were using. And as I read this book, I had only one question. Why hasn't anyone ever shared this paradigm of leadership with me before? I mean, I immediately embraced it. It immediately made sense. But again, I'm saying, hey, I wish I was like you, that I'd had this from the start. I'm a come lately joiner of Leading with Questions.
It's very important for a leader to lead with questions. You spoke about your relationship with thank you and please. reminds me of one of those conversations. I was in Singapore and I asked this gentleman, can you guide me to where the MTR is? And he looked at me straight in my eyes, asked me the same question again. Can you guide me to where the MTR is, please? That please stayed with me for the longest period of time. After that, uh, I don't remember even a single time when I don't use the word please. And I realized the importance of this simple word called please because it adds a different value, a different flavor to a question. We change our ways of working when something is not working in our life. You use the word, I was a benevolent dictator. What was that moment in your life that things that you thought are working, they stopped working for you, and you had no other choice but to lean towards asking questions?
I think the moment for me was reading this first edition and realizing, I don't want to say that it wasn't working at all, that we got nothing done, but as soon as I understood that concept, it was like, who wouldn't want to lead with questions? When I speak, I have 2 slides in my presentation. I always ask a member of the audience, and so you're my member of the audience right now. And on the first slide, it's a picture of a big rowboat, and I say, hey, go off. This is your team. There's you and there's 9 others on this team. As you can see, they all have oars, and as a leader, you want to get that rowboat across the lake as quick as possible. How many of them do you want to have row with you?
All 9, of course.
Yeah, I say, of course. I say it's a silly question, but I'm going somewhere. And then the next slide comes up, the next photo, and it shows that same team, but now they're gathered around your conference table. And the word opportunity is on the table. And I say, now, this is your same team. They're gathered around the table. You've just shared, here's an opportunity that we have. And I say, now listen very carefully. If you're a leader like I used to be, the benevolent dictator, and you think it's your job to figure out how to take advantage of the opportunity and then tell them what to do, how many mental oars are in the water trying to figure out what to do? Only one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
But I say, imagine though that you're a leader who leads with questions. So you share the opportunity, and then instead of telling them what to do, you say, looking at the whole table, you say, what do you all think we might do? Now, how many mental oars might be in the water?
10.
All of them.
Yeah.
And then I say, what is the probability that one of your team members might share an idea better than anything you were thinking? It's not a guarantee, but when you're hearing 9 other ideas, the probability is one of them might be better than what you were thinking.
Very high probability.
Yes. So let's just say across the table sits a young lady. We'll say her name is Sarah. And Sarah shares an idea, and you think to yourself, wow, that is so much better than anything I was thinking.
Yeah.
And so you say, Sarah, love your idea. In fact, Sarah, would you be willing to lead our team in executing on that idea? How hard will Sarah work?
Wow. And just look at the kind of commitment and ownership that one question, one statement is going to infuse in Sarah.
Yes. And in probability with a team, the team may start building on that. Somebody else says, man, Sarah, love that. We could also add this. And now the team is coming up with the decision. And as a result, now when it comes to executing, the team feels like we're executing our idea. And if you understand that, that's just some of the reasons why a leader who leads with questions is so much more effective than a leader who thinks they need to figure it out and tell them.
People do understand that if you tell them it's important to lead with questions, people would say yes to that. And yet people would struggle to ask questions. One, What about questions that inspire, that bring in ownership in others, that I need to understand as a leader?
Gaurav, I'm so glad you asked. One of the things I love about leading with questions is that so many of the best questions are so simple. They're not long, complicated kind of questions. And again, whenever I speak, I say, who here would like to learn to lead with questions in 30 seconds?
Say yes.
Every hand goes up. And so I pull somebody from the audience and I say, when I pull them up, I have them come up and stand beside me. And as they come up, I say, the reason I've selected today Gaurav is I think he has a photographic memory. And they always kind of shake their head like, no. And I say, I think you do. And I say, here's how this is going to work. I have a second hand on my watch. And in a moment, the time will start when I say, Gaurav, here's my first favorite question. And I'll share all four. When I'm done, I'm going to say, do you have them memorized? And if you say yes, I'm going to say, share them. And upon you sharing the fourth question, all four successfully, the clock ends. So are you ready?
Yes.
Here we go. My first favorite question is, what do you think? Second, what else? Third, what else? Fourth, what else? Do you have them memorized?
Yes.
Share them with us.
What do you think? What else? What else? What else?
Oh, we broke the record. 12
Yippee!
seconds. 12 seconds. Now, again, whenever we do this exercise, I look at the audience and I see that some are skeptical. Like, Bob, you can't ask somebody, what do you think? What else? What else? What else? And I say, well, of course not in that rapid fashion.
Yeah.
Imagine a conversation. And on the first question, you're going to add a topic. Hey, what do you think we should do about? There's going to be some topic. And, whenever we're asked to give an opinion, we do this instinctively. We roll out kind of a safe answer. We're testing the waters to see how they treat it. So, Gaurav, if I asked you, hey, what do you think about something? You gave me that first answer. And I said, well, that's stupid. Everyone knows that. You're sorry you spoke.
Yeah.
I'll get nothing more. In fact, next time I ask, I'll get nothing.
Yeah.
But when I say, wow, that's really good. What else? Well, you relax. You think, wow, Bob appreciates what I'm sharing, and you'll give me more. And again, when you stop, instead of just moving on, I'm likely to grab a pen and say, Gaurav, I've got to take notes. This is so good. Please continue. Say more about this. What else? And you'll give me more. What I've discovered is you actually get to their gold nugget, their very best thought, with the third and fourth question. And once I understood this, I don't know if this kind of proverbial story has been shared in India like it's shared here, but there's a story of this gold miner who was mining for gold all his life, looking for the gold vein. He finally gives up. Someone comes along later and discovers the old miner was within 6 inches of the gold vein when he quit. Well, if you only ask somebody, hey, what do you think? Get their first answer and then move on. Well, you're a bit like the gold miner.
I am sure it's not only about what you're asking, because I would love to interact with you with the curiosity and the energy that you were bringing in. What space do you ask questions that make a lot of difference? And how can we develop that space?
I'm going to go around the barn on this. But another question I ask my audience is, who here loves to be told what to do? No hand goes up.
Now,
And I say, if you don't like being told what to do, what would make you think your staff like being told what to do? And I can just see the smiles on the faces like, yeah, that's a good point. And then I say, how have you felt whenever you've had a leader, somebody you reported to, how have you felt when they've asked you, hey, Gaurav, what do you think we should do here?
I love it. I feel important. I feel my views, my ideas matter. I would feel that I'm a part of this team.
Yeah.
and I am seen, I'm heard, I belong here. And I think that's one of the basic desires of all the human beings that I know of.
Yeah. Just that leader without saying any of that. In other words, without saying I value you, I think you've got things to contribute. I'm glad you're on my team. Without
Mm,
saying any of that, just the act of asking for your input
mm,
communicated that. Well, then I say to leaders, well, if that's how you have felt when you've had a leader ask you, how will your staff feel when you ask them?
mm,
Of course, the same. You will be communicating to them, I value you.
mm,
I know you can contribute here. And like you say, a leader who does that consistently, it's like the team members of that leader feel valued. They feel like I belong here. This is a good place. Um, one of the things I know that leaders everywhere want to do is to retain. I don't know how it works in India.
Yeah.
In fact, they probably have another job already, and you've lost them. But a leader who leads with questions where staff feel valued, generally speaking, they're not looking for another opportunity. They're happy where they're at. And I don't
Mm.
mean you can get by with not paying them fairly,
Yeah.
but all things equal, where somebody feels like my input is valued here, that's a place they want to stay.
Absolutely. Bob, help me understand. As I mentioned, right, people do understand the importance of leading with questions, and yet there is something in them that stop them from asking questions. Either it could be the lack of ability to ask questions, or there's something that they are stuck with internally that they find it extremely difficult to pull themselves out of that and go out in the world and lead with questions.
Great point. Um, you, of course, know the culture of India, and I can learn from you there. So I can only share my experience here in the U.S. And in the U.S. culture, so often leaders feel like, hey, I'm the leader. I'm
Hmm.
supposed to have all the answers.
Answers. Yeah.
And so they have this feeling that if I ask a question, I'm communicating that I don't know all the answers. And that will make me as a leader look bad. Or a leader feels like I need to have all the answers. So when they're asked a question for which they really don't have an answer, they're tempted to actually then make one up. And I know I was that leader, and my staff were kind, but I'm thinking there's times they must have been thinking, I don't think Bob knew. I think he just made that up.
Yeah.
And then I go down this path. I say, if you're a leader, when you ask them a question, if they said, wow, Goroff, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Would your respect for that leader go up or down?
My answer is, of course, it will go up because
Yeah.
we
And
are to operate from that space. Yeah.
we also know no one has all the answers. Now, a leader who will say, I don't know the answer to that, when they do say, oh, I know the answer to that, well, we trust them more because we know that when they don't, they admit it. And today, let's go down this path for a moment.
Say it again. Ask me the question again, please.
Yeah. How would you like to be able to respond to any question you are ever asked?
From a space of authenticity?
Yeah. Well, here's what. Goroff, well, let's just say you ask me a question and I say, Goroff, that is a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't
What
know.
do you think the answer is? Well, many times they actually have an answer. But let's just say Goroff said, well, Bob, I came to you because I don't know the answer to that. Well, Goroff, again, that is a great question. We would benefit from knowing the answer. You don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. Where could we find the answer?
Where could we find the answer? Wow.
And often that staff member will say, well, They name another person. They talk about a book. They say we could do a Google search. They have some idea where the answer could come from. And I say, Golroff, would you go do that research and come back to me with the answer? Because we will benefit by knowing that. Well, first of all, I've admitted I don't know. But second, I've affirmed the question. I've made them feel good that they've come and asked. And then I've put the burden back to them to go find the answer and come back to me. And again, when they do, I'm going to express appreciation.
And what I'm picking up here, Bob, apart from asking question, I think what is really important is operating from a space of curiosity and be very comfortable with this space called I don't know. And I think one more thing that I'm picking up here in this conversation is the importance of genuine appreciation, right? I don't know the answer. And when the other person comes up with the answer, how can I genuinely appreciate? Bob, now don't tell me, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I know. How would you answer that? How would you answer that?
I knew it. I really don't know. I personally believe that's where the maturity would come in. And would genuinely want to, I can share with you my perspective, of course, but from an authority who has done a lot of research, who has done a lot of work in the space of questions, would love to hear from you.
In the U.S., Navy Commander Michael D. Abrashoff took over the command of one of the U.S.'s most modern warships, the USS Benfold. And I guess in the U.S. Navy, there's about 300 ships, vessels. And when he took over command, I don't know how the U.S. Navy measures morale, but however they do, morale on that ship was the lowest of all ships in the U.S. Navy. 18 months later, under his leadership, retest of morale was the highest of all ships in the U.S. Navy. He literally took the ship from worst to first. And of course, you hear that and you say, well, how did he do that? Well, I don't know all the things he did, but I do know the first thing he did. Upon taking command, he set up 300 meetings with the 300 sailors on that ship. One-on-one, 15 minutes with each of them. And in those meetings, he asked 3 questions. And again, these are so simple. You'll have them memorized upon hearing them one time. He asked each sailor, what do you like best about this ship? What do you like least? What would you change if you could? And at the end of the first day, he might have only had time to have 10 of these meetings. But there was a buzz on the ship. The new captain's different. The new captain's asking us for input. And now it didn't take long, and he's hearing things and he's thinking to himself, what do you mean we're going to fix that? But Captain Abrashoff, very wise man. When he began, now he didn't promise to make every change he heard, but it didn't take long, and he's hearing several, and it's like, hey, we can fix that. So when he pulls all the sailors together, and he announces a change or several that are going to be made, guess who he gave credit to for the idea?
Those people, those sailors.
Yes. He had a sailor stand up, called him by name. Thank you for that input. We're going to implement that. Now, it didn't matter if in his own mind he'd implemented that on all the other ships he had. He didn't take credit for the idea. He gave the credit to the sailor or several sailors that had shared that idea. Well, when you just hear that, you say, well, of course, morale on that ship had to increase. And I think, again, there's, in other words, he not only led with questions, of course. Second, he listened, of course. But third, when he began to announce changes, he gave credit to those who had given the input even if what they were inputting, he already knew, like in all of his experience, yep, we need to do that. And like, you've said, it's not only being curious, but it's understanding relationally that, well, we all love to be seen and we all love to be heard. And when somebody sees us and listens to us, and then we see their feedback, and as one of my friends once said, he said, being silent and listening are not the same thing.
Being
So in other
silent.
words, if while you're
Listening.
talking, somebody's just silent, but they're thinking other things, that's not the same thing. And what is the evidence that we're actually listening? It's when we give feedback, but the ultimate thing is when we say, wow, I'm going to implement that. Wow, at that point, you feel really hurt.
Yeah. And I can see that behind you, there's a beautiful plaque that says listen and silent have the same letters.
Yes.
Coincidence and a big time question mark. Bob, one of the questions that people ask me is, Gaurav, can you tell me the most powerful question either you have heard or you have asked? Let me ask this question. What, according to you, is the most powerful question either you have asked or you have heard?
The one that comes to my mind is this one. Can you please say more about that? I use that question frequently, most frequently when I'm asked a question. Somebody comes and says, hey, Bob, here's a question. Well, before responding in any way, can you please say more about that? They always are willing to say more. Now, the reason I ask that is before I understood this, I'd be asked a question, I'd immediately give an answer. And again, most people are so polite, they don't actually say, well, Bob, that wasn't my question. They say, oh, thank you. And then they ask another question and you realize they just reworded the first question because you missed it. Now, Gaurav, I always say my wife's not that polite. She'll ask a question, I'll start speaking, and she'll say, she calls me Robert. She'll say, okay, there you go again, Robert. You haven't even heard my question. You're telling me what to do.
Yeah.
And so at any rate, please tell me more. And when I'm speaking, I have this funny little story I share. I say, let me illustrate the value of, can you please tell me more? Little Johnny is 7 years old. Okay. He comes running into the house, yelling at his mother, Mom, 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 where did I come from? Johnny's mom has not been expecting this question, not at age 7, but collecting her thoughts just a bit, she invites Johnny in the living room where she shares all about the facts of life. And little Johnny's eyes are wide as saucers as he takes in every word. And when she's done, she says, so now, Johnny, do you understand where you came from? And he says, no, Joey said he came from California and asked me where I came from. Now, so at that point, do you think Johnny's mom had wished when he came running into the house yelling, Mom, 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 where did I come from? She'd have said, Johnny, tell me more. He would have immediately said, Joey said he came from California and asked me where I came from. And she could have said, boy, you were born right here in Texas. You go tell Joey that you're from Texas. Johnny would have ran out of the house saying, Joey, I'm from Texas. And Johnny's mom could have saved the facts of life story for when maybe that will be the question in a few years.
Precisely.
Well, it's a funny story. One of my most favorite questions is, can you please tell me more?
Can you please tell me more? Bob, how does your relationship with questions, what is your relationship with questions? What is your relationship with your question when you continue to ask yourself? Because there are certain questions that we don't want to address for our own selves, which are a little confronting in nature. How do you deal with that situation when a question is emerging for you, from you, through you?
I have two thoughts there. And that is, some questions cannot be answered immediately. And And it's not a problem either when we're asked a question or when we ask a question where somebody says, wow, I'm going to need to think about that. Now, that can be a way of just putting it off. But on the other hand, there really are times where I need space and time to think about it. And that I can't answer immediately. And to be comfortable, in other words, at times with not having the answer. And when I'm asking, giving grace where they don't immediately need to have the answer. Now, that's one path. Let me go down another path, though. And that is, here's some research I discovered that's really fascinating. Again, it's something we do instinctively. And again, I only know the US culture. You'll have to tell me if this is also true in India. But the research showed that when the average person asks a question, they only wait 2 or 3 seconds for that person to start answering. And they are so bothered by the silence that if the other person doesn't start talking in 2 or 3 seconds, they will either answer the question themselves, ask another question, or just move on in the conversation with no self-awareness of what they've just done. And so one of the things I talk about is, I ask this question: who here would like to become a better listener in 8 seconds? It's kind of like, who would like to lead with questions in 30 seconds? Well, here, how could you be a better listener in 8 seconds? Again, every hand goes up. And I say, I share this research that the average person, when there isn't an answer in 2 or 3 seconds, is so bothered by the silence that they start speaking, again, instinctively. This isn't a thought through, just instinctive. So I say, ask your question and then relax, keep comfortable eyesight, not intense, but comfortable, and start counting to yourself: 1001, 1002, 1003. Give them whatever time they need to answer. Now, of course, some questions can be answered quickly. Hey, where can I get a drink of water? Oh, right over here. But if you ask a question like, hey, Gaurav, what would you say has been one of your greatest failures that actually has led to one of your greatest successes?
What a beautiful question.
Yeah. What would you say has been one of your greatest failures that's led to one of your greatest successes? If you've never been asked that question before, how helpful will it be if I start talking again at 2 or 3 seconds? Not very helpful.
Not at all.
But if I will give you silence and just be comfortable with silence, I may well be the beneficiary of a great story. And again, should you respond with, wow, Bob, that is a fascinating question, I'm going to have to think about that before I can answer. Of course, give them, say, Gaurav, I'll be very curious to hear your answer. But of course, whenever it has come to your mind and you've had time to think, yes, take a day or take a week, whatever you need. Come back to me when you've got the answer, because I would love to hear it from you. And so I don't know, I've responded. I don't know if that's the response you were looking for.
You have, Bob. And there's nothing specific that I was looking for. I'm just here to learn from the master, exchange notes, and share what's my understanding of questions is. Bob, help me understand. Has there been a time where you continued to ask questions and you found yourself in a difficult situation because either the other person was not willing to respond or did not have an answer? What was the difficulty that you dealt with, and how did you get out of that?
Yeah, that does happen sometimes. And, kind of, I mentioned a moment ago, some questions can be answered instantly. Some questions can be answered with 8 seconds of silence, or maybe 30. And then some, like, wow, I'm going to need to think about that. And giving people whatever length of time they need to respond. If you've asked a great question and and they've appreciated it, give them whatever time they need, kind of thing. I say that I got this from a friend. He said that whenever we speak, and he didn't mean being a speaker on a platform, even in a conversation, he said you ought to imagine a traffic light. And when you start, the light is green. But he said it only stays green about 3 minutes. If you talk more than 3 minutes without letting them respond, you ought to imagine it's now blinking yellow. And then he said, if you talk for 5 minutes straight without letting them respond, you ought to imagine the light has turned red. They're looking like they're paying attention, but their mind is actually elsewhere.
Yeah.
He said, how do you get them back? You've got to ask them a question. And just think about it again, Gaurav, I think all of us have learned the art, I'll call it an art, of looking like we're paying attention when somebody is talking on and on and on, when our mind may actually be elsewhere. But Gaurav, let's just say I'd lost you. Your mind was somewhere else. I said, Gaurav, can I ask you a question? Now, where does your attention come to?
Immediately onto you.
Yes, you're waiting for the question. What will Bob's question be?
Yeah.
And then I ask the question, and you then are thinking, okay, how do I want to respond? And let's say it's a question requiring you to share an opinion. Even as you begin to speak, you're going to be reading my face. Does Bob appreciate? Is Bob understanding? Is Bob confused? Is Bob upset? You will even edit what you continue to say based on reading my face.
Precisely.
But when I ask a question, from the time it takes for you to hear the question to give me your full response, 100% of the computing power of your brain is focused on the question and your answer.
Precisely.
And of course, when you're done, if I start talking again and I talk too long, your mind may again go elsewhere until I say, Gaurav, I have another question for you. There you are, back.
Yeah. So Bob, you said it so beautiful that there are times when a question would need 8 seconds of silence. At times it might need a little longer. What is that one of those questions that you have in your life that you've been staying with for the longest period of time and is yet unanswered?
That's an incredible question. I'm valuing that, and I'll actually have to think about that more. But you've reminded me of another angle on the same thing. And that is, the answer to some questions changes over time. Now, there are some facts of life or facts of science that don't change. But when we think question like, hey, Gaurav, let's just say it was the year 2000. And on January 1, I said, Gaurav, tell me both the highlights of the past year and tell me what your goals are for this year. And then another question, how do you want to grow this year? Taking some thought, but you'd have given me an answer. If I meet with you again, January 1, 2001, and I ask the same questions, the questions are the same, but the answers will be updated. There may be some threads that continue. And I'm just saying, we do ask sometimes the same questions like, hey, what do I want to get done this year? And what are the greatest challenges that I need to figure out a solution to? And So those answers change over time. And
Makes
we need
sense.
to remember that some great questions, the value is that they are excellent questions for us to ask ourselves on a regular basis, not necessarily daily or hourly, but whatever the right amount of time and space between. Can we confirm our next coaching time? Here's my final question. Between now and then, meaning our next coaching time, what steps do you want to take to make progress on what we've talked about today?
Wow.
Now, mind you, as a coach, I've not said, okay, here's what I want you to do.
Hmm.
I'm asking them,
You're
what
asking that
steps do
question.
they want to take? Now it's the next coaching time. And after the niceties of, hey, how you doing? How's the family? I will then say, last time we were together, you said that by today you wanted to do A, B, and C. Tell me how that's gone. I'm not saying, did you complete it? I'm just asking for an update. And what my coaches know is Bob never assigns me anything, but he asks me what I want to do. And then he checks in the next coaching time. Did I do what I said I wanted to do? And again, with none of my coaches, I can't fire them. I can't promote them. Nor do I want to. But it provides a subtle accountability because, none of us want to say, yeah, I'm always saying I'll do this. And then, nope, I never do it. Especially when, no, my coach didn't say, here's what I want you to do. My coach asked me what I wanted to do. And, but there again is an example of a simple question, but powerful. And the answers change every time. Now, I'm thinking on, I'm coming back. I've been processing on the back burner your question. And I think the question that I continually ask, and the answers evolve over time, is what is the most significant things I can be doing to make a difference here on planet Earth? And in other words, my contribution. What should I be focusing on that would make the biggest difference? Probably also evaluating, you've heard this, I'm sure, many times. The thought is always, how can I work smarter rather than harder?
Yeah.
And I'm not against hard work.
Yeah.
But it's taking time to think, if I was to approach it this way, it would have a bigger impact.
Yeah.
Rather than, running. It's like, is there a better way to do this? And that question is kind of one that's always in my mind. And the answers continually evolve. The goal for all of us is wanting to work smarter rather than harder. And again, I'm not against working harder, but I want to work smart and hard rather than just hard. And, I'm running around the barn, but I'm not going anywhere.
So true. So true. As I often share with people, let your listening give birth to the next question.
Yeah.
And when we listen to the other person, the question comes to us. It's not my question, it's your question that's coming through me. And, as I asked this question and you said that, how can I contribute? What can I do to make a difference in the world that I'm a part of? It reminds me of a story about a young journalist went to Einstein. He said, Mr. Einstein, we would like to ask you a question. If you were to ask a question that's the most significant question for humanity, what would that be? Or in case you would like to give a piece of advice, what would that be? Einstein was silent for a long time. He thought for a while. He said, I don't have a piece of advice for humanity. I have a question instead. So the journalist waited and waited and waited in an anticipation that Einstein is going to ask a question that would require a lot of equation, a lot of scientific know-how. After all, you're asking this question, you're having this conversation with Mr. Einstein, if the world is a safe place to live in. And out of curiosity, journalists asked this question, why do you think? if the world is a safe space to live in, is the most significant question for humanity. He said, because if your answer is yes, you would start to make bridges in the world. If your answer is no, you will start to create fences. The quality of your life depends on the quality of question that you ask. Bob, thank you so much. It was an absolute delight having you on this podcast.
Gaurav, it's been my pleasure to be with you, and with all your guests, everyone who's listening and viewing this. Grateful for their time also to take the time. But again, I'll look forward to the next time with you.